Some of my earliest television memories are of watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the evenings after school, and as I've gotten older, I continue to come back to the show time and time again. One aspect that strikes me in particular is how well the show invites thinking on various sociological themes, sometimes by engaging them head on, and at other times allowing them to sit ever present in the background to some larger plot. The show, particularly in its early seasons, tackled social issues very overtly and consciously, with episodes looking variously at issues of race, gender, crime, class, and of course, the family. And this is something that's been increasingly recognised in recent years. And I always thought it would be interesting to dive a little deeper into the sociological side of the show, looking both at themes presented in particular episodes and on a broader level at the show as a whole. It should be said I'm not a professional sociologist and I don't claim to be an expert. I will, as much as possible, defer to other authorities when looking at the various themes that present themselves. I enjoyed the subject at school, and still today its pertinence to contemporary life interests me greatly. And neither am I saying The Fresh Prince sets out to be, or even primarily is, a show about sociology. I don't pretend this is a magical key that unlocks some secret message behind the show, just that with its setting and characters, it offers ample opportunities from which to jump into sociological research and theories, and in turn, certainly I've always thought, connecting academia to popular culture might help bring a new appreciation for the texts themselves. The Season 2 episode My Brother's Keeper is a good case study that demonstrates this. The episode centers around a basketball game between Will's team, Bel Air Academy, and Malibu Prep, with their star player Marcus Stokes. For the first part of the episode, Will presumes he is a superior basketball player to Marcus on the basis that
I'm from Philly, Holmes. Ain't nobody from Malibu gonna beat me in basketball.
But Will's perspective changes suddenly when he learns Marcus not only grew up in poverty as well, but has a child. Like Will, Marcus is only about 17 or 18. His partner presumably a similar age, and his son probably no older than 3 or 4, meaning they would have been around 15 or 16 when he was born. Now, this episode was produced in 1991 and first broadcast in 92, and as with any 30-year-old text, there's a degree of translation required when bringing in contemporary research. The world of 92 is not the world of today. In 1991, the teenage birth rate in the US peaked at 61.8 births per 1,000 adolescent girls. Since then, the overall rate has declined by around 73%, but it's still disproportionately higher among Black, Latina, and Native American teenagers than other ethnic groups, though it has also fallen overall for each of these two. Devi Akella and Melissa Jordan conducted a study in Georgia in 2014 into the reasons for high birth rates, specifically among Black teenagers. Combined with Latinas, they found Black teenagers accounted for 57% of teenage births, despite representing just 35% of the 15 to 19-year-old female population in the US. In terms of educational attainment, in one study, Stephanie Mollborn of the University of Colorado looked at various bits of data from 1988 to 2000 and found 73% of teenage parents completed a high school degree or its equivalent by the turn of the millennium, compared with 95% of non-parents. Broken down by gender, she found the rate of completion was higher among mothers at 75% compared to just 62% of fathers. In another study from 2007, asking what might explain lower levels of educational attainment, she adopts a resource-based approach, which is looking at parental need for things like clothing and food for children, and argues there seem to be two primary causes of decreased educational attainment among teenage parents compared to non-parents: increased resource needs and a dearth of available resources among adolescent parents. Mothers and fathers need money to buy food, clothing, diapers, and other items for their children. They require either somewhere to live with their children rent-free or money for rent. In order to attend school or work for pay, they must also have either free babysitting help or money for childcare. Evidence suggests that for most teenage parents, these high resource demands are not being met either by themselves or by others. Mollborn links these disadvantages to pre-existing social and socio-economic factors, like whether someone grows up in a single-parent household or has access to childcare, for example, from extended family members or such like. This is something Will alludes to in the episode when he deliberately but secretly lets Malibu win the game in order for Marcus to attract the attention of a college basketball scout in attendance and potentially turn professional afterwards, and Marcus confronts him. Will recalls his own deprived upbringing and the new privileges he has with his life in Bel Air.
Oh, I get it. 'Cause I got a kid, I'm some kind of charity case? Well, let's get something straight, homie. My situation does not define who I am. I define who I am.
Look, man, I got lucky, all right? You know, I got a rich uncle. A lot of brothers come from where we come from. I mean, they don't have the same opportunities, man. That's your ticket.
Discussing factors like family situation, however, also highlight how there is a lot My Brother's Keeper leaves out. It doesn't address at all Marcus's relationship, if there is one, with his own father, and neither does it explicitly ever state whether he lives with his son's mother. In the early 90s, the majority of teenage fathers did not live with their children, and studies have suggested this might impact the child's own likelihood to become a teenage parent themselves, though Marcus implies he does when he talks about providing for his family. One of the recurring factors Akella and Jordan found was that their participants tended to come from poverty, but that also their circumstances motivated them in their pursuit of future educational or career objectives. It might be said that Marcus personifies a similar experience.
I'm not dependent on this. I'm dependent on this. My b-ball scholarship is going to get me a free education in engineering so that I can provide for my family with my mind.
But the limitations of Akella and Jordan's research should also be acknowledged. Not only does its qualitative nature mean it engages a small study of Georgian teenagers, but these teenagers are also all girls, and the mother of Marcus's child is notably absent from the episode. And gender can have varying significance for teenage parents. For example, Mollborn found that working could be disadvantageous for the educational attainment of teenage fathers compared with non-fathers, but there was no similar finding for mothers. It's interesting to note in the episode that Marcus is said to work a lot of jobs alongside school. And Will throwing the game is selfless, but it turns out he underestimates Marcus's ambition. Mollborn argues financial aid packages may provide financial resources to and reduce the need for paid work among teenage parents. It's interesting then that Marcus's vision for providing for his family speaks to his using a scholarship for higher educational attainment. He doesn't propose to graduate from high school and go straight into work, but wants to pursue an engineering degree because in the long term he knows it will provide him a higher and probably more sustainable level of income. There's a lot more that could be said here about how the episode presents social class as well as education, and I could have at any point easily gone off on tangents about gender and other aspects like that, but these are whole other conversations for other days and perhaps other episodes. There is one final aspect of the story to touch on that I find intriguing, though, related to media representation. From a narrative standpoint, the young black male with exceptional athletic ability that Marcus and to an extent Will also embodies is a stereotype. Basketball plays a big role in the early seasons of the show, and it's on the basketball court that Will has the most success at school. Joseph Cooper of the University of Connecticut writes, "This stereotype holds that black male athletes have superior athletic abilities that enable them to excel at higher levels in sports. Black males are often deemed as intellectually inferior and morally deficient. They're also less likely than their white peers to have their race and gender associated with being intelligent or academic achievement." Cooper goes on to argue that despite the academic neglect, black males continue to constitute a majority of the participants on football and men's basketball teams at 55 and 56% respectively. This highlights how they are more valued for their athletic abilities than for their academic promise, he says. To my memory, this is something Will Smith has spoken about in recent interviews as well, and he cites this as one of the reasons the show deliberately phased out the basketball-centric episodes. In this way too, Marcus's assertion that he defines who he is might also be read as his resisting both being confined too narrowly into the black athlete stereotype and the idea more generally that black athletes lack academic potential. Though I guess there's also something that could be said for the way that black athletes are expected to perform above and beyond academically in order for them to prove their own worth. I'm not saying that that's what the episode is going for, but it's an interesting angle to consider nonetheless. My Brother's Keeper touches on race, class, education, and gender, and in life, as in the episode, they're all very much interlinked. I don't think the episode is trying to make any one statement on these issues so much as drawing our attention to them in totality. Often, identifying the ways in which these themes overlap and interact with one another helps us to keep our eye always on the bigger picture. And sociology is the study of society. Society is, after all, a complex, multifaceted thing, and there's a lot more that could be said here, as I've said on any of these things. We're looking at a very niche issue and some of its implications in other spheres of life, but we're only scratching the surface. And we're only looking at the US here. There's a lot more that could be said about other Western societies and other non-Western societies. Perhaps a good follow-up from this might look at something a bit more macro, like class, and the way it runs through the very core of the show, right from the first episode.